Humdrummedy, humdrummedy, humdrummedy.
Hey, listener, and welcome back. I think we can all agree that self-awareness is the first step to self-improvement. But my guest today believes that self-awareness is in fact the first step to building a better society. Alex Kain is the author of The Philosophy, a critical upgrade for humanity, in which he outlines a methodology to begin changing societal ills by first changing ourselves. Tune in to find out about the difference between true north versus magnetic north of social values. All right, let's begin implementing our upgrade. Oh, hey there, Alex. Welcome to Humdrummedy. Glad you could join us today.
Thanks, Graham, for having me.
Yeah, now, where in the world do we find you? And I think based on your accent, it might be a bit of a clue.
Well, thanks, mate. I'm in Melbourne, Australia right now.
Yeah, down under. So I can never remember, are you a day ahead or a day behind on North America?
I'm ahead of you right now, so if you want the lotto results, just ask me.
Right, so we're speaking to you in the future.
That's it. Woo!
Alex, why I've asked you to join us on the show today is because you are the author of a book entitled The Philosophy, a critical upgrade for humanity.
That's right.
And can you tell me what was the impetus for you to write this book?
Okay, so it's an interesting story because the intention was never to write a book for me. The intention for me was to document my observations of the world. And so I guess where it started from for me was going along in my life and doing the things that we're all supposed to do, achieve financial success and do all that sort of stuff. And as I was going along on my pathway, I started to feel this, I guess, hollow, empty feeling that success wasn't all it was cracked up to be. For me, it was a case of I can't view myself as successful if I'm going ahead and climbing my little pyramid, but other people around me are doing it really tough. For me, that didn't equate to success. So it was that shared responsibility that I felt that I guess prompted me to just question everything around me, look at the systems that govern society, look at how we operate, and just ask the question, is this the best we can do?
Right. So you say essentially you were looking to redefine what success meant to you personally. Now, when we talk about success, generally we're talking about personal success. Were you looking to change that meaning not only for yourself but for others as to what a grander definition of success might be?
Absolutely. For me, success is not something I can achieve in my own right, swim in my own lane, and have blinkers on and not see what's going on around me. For me, that didn't equate to success. It was modeled to me, like to all of us, that this is what success is. Start something successful, accumulate wealth, grow, that sort of thing, have the good things in life. But for me, it just became an empty goal to strive just for that. I watch the news and I see what's going on, and I just didn't feel right about attaining that level of success just for myself.
So then what do you feel would be a new or modern definition of success?
Well, I think it's where we take everyone with us. So it's more about, and the cover of my book is actually Maslow's hierarchy, right? So that pyramid that shows us reaching our basic needs and then more advanced needs until we finally self-actualize at the top. And for me, it was like the model that we see at the moment is that everyone's just racing to get to the top of that pyramid for themselves. And for me, it's more about let's hold everyone's hands and we all go up together. That's what success meant for me.
Right. So when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm not going to repeat at the moment, people can look that up for themselves. But the goal at the end of the hierarchy is to achieve a state of self-actualization. So would you say then that based on the way society is structured now, that many people, they're missing all the other basic needs and cannot get to the point of achieving self-actualization because they're too caught up in, just getting those basic needs to live, survive, and get through life.
Well, that's actually what Maslow's proposing. So, in his theory, I think from 1943, he says that you can't focus on those more advanced goals until you've achieved your basic needs. I mean, having a job isn't on your mind if you don't have food. So, you've got to get those basic needs met first. And the way we do that now is we get a job. We have to earn our living. And if you think about that phrase, we have to actually earn our life. We're born into this world not through any choice of our own, and we're then encumbered with this need to spend most of our life working to earn money, to feed ourselves, to shelter, to clothe ourselves. And as I say in the book, we're not that different from animals. They spend all their time foraging for food. We just go and get a job, which is effectively our foraging, which gives us our food and shelter anyway.
Right. So, in along the thematic lines of my podcast, this idea of where living life often leads to uh, humdrumedy, as I've termed it, these daily routines that we find ourselves in, is getting to the top of Maslow's hierarchy where we need to strive to get out of those daily routines, to rise above just a basic existence.
Well, I guess under the current paradigm, that's what we're told is the way to get out of the humdrumedy, right? It's to excel, to have more, to do better. What I'm proposing is that we scrap the whole current paradigm to begin with, which says that we just have to work harder, work more, attain more. I'm saying that that's the missed opportunity. We're so focused, and look, we live in a capitalist society, most of us, and the goal is he who dies with the most toys wins, right? And it's sad, but we spend most of our life chasing that goal, and it seems like we've taken our eyes off the real prize, which is how do we level up as humanity? Now, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. There are lots of benefits of capitalism, innovation. It drives, lots going on. But I think the emphasis has been too much placed on that. Imagine if we didn't have to worry about working. Well, what else could we spend our time doing? We could pursue our creativity. We could do more volunteering. We could do more for each other. It's just the focus that I mean, capitalism in itself breeds the idea we have to fend for ourselves. And it's that we become so competitive that we stop looking at our neighbors and we just focus on us.
Now, counter to that idea, if, say, we lived in a society where everything was provided for us, we didn't have to worry about our basic needs. I mean, what's to then inspire us to be more than just, somebody who's relaxing and taking it easy, visits to the beach, doing pursuits of leisure? How does that then advance society?
It probably advances it a little slower than what it is now. But think about what life would look like. If you could go to the beach, if you could paint, if you could write, you would be a more happier person if you could pursue the things that give you joy. Now, just to give you some case studies, I do talk about in the book a universal basic income as one concept for helping to fund a minimum quality of life for everyone. Now, they've run trials of UBI in certain countries, and what they found is most people didn't slack off and do nothing. And in fact, I shouldn't use the word slack off because that's how we view it now if you're not working. But what we found is that people either took more part-time jobs, did more volunteering, did other things because they had a little bit more breathing space. It just changed things around. They didn't just completely give up work. Now, some people would, and that's okay. And I think we have to view that that's okay. But if you want to aspire for more, you can still work, you can still do other things. But imagine that you had your basic needs covered. So if you wanted to paint all day, you could do that. You wouldn't have a great quality of life, but you would be a happier person, and that would impact the health system. There'd be all these flow on effects. But if you wanted to aspire to more, you could. But we just would set maybe a ceiling on what that might look like so that we don't have these extreme ends of the spectrum of extreme wealth and extreme poverty.
Right. Now, just to play devil's advocate on this
I
idea,
love devil's advocate, Graham.
I mean, it's somewhat of an idealistic viewpoint because what about the concept of adversity, driving people to excel? And without that adversity, you just end up in mediocrity.
Well, I disagree in some ways. What we're doing is we're not saying that there's not adversity, and we're not saying that we still shouldn't develop innovation and new medicines and things. We would still do that, but the focus wouldn't be on money as the reason we're doing it. It would be on for the greater good. Now, I know it does sound utopian, but I'm saying that's because we need a mind shift. A lot of these concepts I discuss in the book will sound so foreign and alien in the current paradigm because all we think about is the need to make money. But if you get rid of that need and you start looking from within that perspective, it starts feeling a little bit refreshing and even a bit of relief. And there are lots of organizations that run like this. There are lots of communities that run on a co-op kind of basis, and they work and they function well, and people look after each other. We're just not used to it because we're so used to just fighting for ourselves that we don't know any other way.
So, really, I would say what your philosophy is coming down to is more that you would, and perhaps you can correct me on this, but do you view yourself as a humanist?
I'm absolutely a humanist. Um, but I mean, I believe that we can achieve. And look, the opening line of my book is, "What's the point?" And what is the point of life? If you get back to the actual root of why we're here and what are we doing? Is it to work? Is it to chase money? For me, they become false gods that we've worshipped. For me, it's more about, well, why are we here? Is it to enjoy life, to make connections, to learn, to level up so that the next generations have better life? For me, that's more the goal than just acquire intergenerational wealth. For me, that's become a thing that we're focused on, but it's not why we're here. And I'm just trying to say we need to rethink that. We need, as I say in the book, a philosophical flood. We need really to think differently. And if we don't, we're going to keep getting more of the same. And I don't know many people who think that more of the same is a great thing.
Then, what you're saying, why are we here? In your view, why are we here? And what do we need to do to be more fulfilled as individuals and produce a more fruitful society?
I think we know when we have connections with other people, really good connections, that we feel, I don't know, our cup is full. And for me, it's because we are social animals, it's about connecting with others. It's about understanding our personal purpose in life. For me, the philosophy's become my purpose. For others, it might be raising a family. For some, it might be solving some of the world's problems. But I think it's got to be in the context of a shared responsibility that we are all in it together. And I think that's what we're lacking at the moment. We're just so focused on the fact that we need to survive initially and then thrive. But that definition of thrive and success is about how much can I get for myself. And that just turns us into an over-consuming society. It just means that we are so competitive. The idea of welfare, we look down on people who aren't pulling their weight. And I think we just need to look at how do we do this better. I liken society to a human body. We can't look at a toe that might get infected and say, well, the toe's infected, but I'm up here in the head, I'm okay. Because if that sepsis takes hold, we're all done. So it's just understanding that connection that we all have.
So then what is going to be the new metric that we are going to measure, as we mentioned earlier, success by or the progress of society?
I think we just look at society itself. So for me, some of the big issues, if you look at things such as homelessness, poverty, domestic violence, why do these exist? They exist because we've enabled them to exist. And in fact, because we're so focused on ourselves, we don't really look around us and see what's going on. In the book, I talk about these exist for one reason, because we have a lack of respect for each other. Right? Respect is at the cornerstone of why society has the ills that it faces. The wars that we have, the way we are with each other is all about a lack of respect. So the book talks about respect, empathy, and gratitude as three key pillars. How do we change society through that? For me, the answer is through a completely overhauled education system. So we actually turn school from an institution for learning subject matter into an incubator for nurturing great human beings. And that means instilling values, life skills, other things besides just math and science. And over generations, we'll start to see a change in the kids that come through that process, who then become the parents of the next generation, and so on. It's not a quick fix, it's an intergenerational approach, but we need to start now.
Then what would a school day look like for children that we are trying to instill these values into?
So, the way I view the curriculum would be it would start from preschool and it would go all the way through in an age appropriate and culturally sensitive way. So you would learn about respect, you would learn about others, you'd learn also your normal subject matter, but you would learn how to handle credit, finance, life skills as well. Um, but it would be taught all along the way, not as a checkbox. Yes, we've done inclusion. That's it. We're done for that now. It would be something that people are learning all the time, but it keeps advancing as the kids get older through the years. So that by the time they've come through at 18 or whatever, they are different people than the kids coming through school now who are just learning science, English, whatever. So I think that way we're actually changing the cohort that comes out at the end. And that in turn, they become the parents of the next generation of kids that come through. So there's more of an understanding. For us at our age, you might say maybe we're too far gone. But I think this awareness that maybe we can change, it starts in the school, we start taking it on board, and then we're able to start transforming society over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Do you feel, and this is a thought that always kind of crosses my mind, and I wasn't raised really very religious, although my mother attended church quite a bit. But, in the past, religion and going to church provided people not only a spiritual means for expressing themselves, but gave them that extra bit of, civic involvement, and
Morality, values, yeah.
yes, but more than that, I'm thinking more of having a place to meet and greet with your friends and neighbors. And we've sort of lost that now. We don't have that sort of, and I don't want to use the term ritual per se, but that, you would get up on Sunday morning, you would go to church, obviously you'd hear a sermon, but then afterwards, I think the value, and I know like for my mother, this was a huge bit, was that social interaction with other people. And people don't have something that's replaced that.
Yeah.
So, so would that be something we would look to advocate for more in school, having more social interaction between, parents and the students getting together more often?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily in that context, but overall, we need to connect more with people. Our village used to be the people we lived with. Now we just drive in our driveway into our home, lock the doors, turn on the security cameras, and we live a siloed life now. The village now is migrated online, and it's very different. We're living in the most connected times we've ever lived in, and yet we're the most disconnected we've ever been. And I think we need to find ways to reconnect with each other. And I think that transforming of us will automatically breed that need and want to actually connect more. I don't even think it's something we need to force, but I also talk about, getting to know your neighbors. That's a simple act we can all do, is go and speak to your neighbors. I know in the US and here in Australia, we have an International Neighbours Day, and it happens once a year, and it's an opportunity to run events in your local street and area and get to know people, because I think we need that. We're not connecting organically. You might know the neighbor either side of you, and maybe that's because you've had a dispute over a tree or something, but we're not really connecting with people in our area. So I do believe it will change over time if we change what humanity looks like, what society looks like. But in the meantime, we can do some simple things like just going and meeting our neighbors.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we do talk about this idea of, we are in the most connected time, in humanity. But really, those connections, it's really a form of isolation because you're connecting with people, say you're watching TikTok or whatever. These are people that you would never interact with, most likely in a face-to-face manner. So we need more of this face-to-face communal interaction.
Absolutely. And look, what you see on TikTok and Instagram, it's not real, right? This is people putting their best face forward in whatever capacity that is. I'm talking about real connection and, you know, how well do we know all the people in our street, some who may be lonely, alone, who may be doing it tough. Again, we probably don't know because we're so focused on just our own survival and doing our own thing, looking after us and our families, that we don't see the wider family. And the the concept of respect, I say, is built on four relationships. It's our relationship with the universe is the first one, so nature, the world that we look after. Our relationship to ourselves. How aware are we of our shortcomings, our triggers, our patterns? Our relationship to our inner circle of friends, family, and people that we do connect with, and our relationship to community. So people we don't personally know, but that wider connection. And it's those four relationships. If we work on those, we can completely change how we all mesh with each other.
And so, would you say out of those four things that you listed, is the start really about being more self aware?
Well, yes, but that's why I say the first relationship is our relationship to the universe. And why that's the first one is if you start to understand the miracle that each person is, that we're even here spinning around on this little marble in the vastness of space and everything that had to happen for us to even be here. It's that feeling of awe and inspiration that is the first thing that we need, because it's hard for us to look at other people. You know, someone can come along and king hit someone because they just simply don't respect human life. And so the first thing is we've got to understand what a miracle each and every person is. Once we do that, then we've got a context or a framework for viewing other people. Or we might look at ourselves and question, oh, yeah, maybe I'm not treating that person how they should be treated. I'm treating them because that's my pattern, my self awareness that now tells me, oh, maybe I'm running on this little program. And so it's those things that start to open up the ability for us to connect with others. But we first need to connect to nature and the world and then connect to ourselves. Those are the first most important things. Once we do that, we can then start looking at others in the world in a different light.
Now, I believe in your book, you mention that people really, in essence, no longer wish to discuss the meaning of life.
Well, I don't know that people even care about it anymore. People are just so busy doing their own thing. I mean, if you're self aware, you might have these questions, But a lot of people are just too busy making their money, doing their thing. They don't even want to change how things are because they're so much on that road, so committed to whatever they're doing. There's no room for reflection. And that's sad to me.
Well, and this goes back more to what you were speaking of about changing the education system. Because, do you feel that society has taught us to be less questioning and just more accepting of how the world is?
I think we get beaten down into submission of that reality because to stand up and fight against the system is, it's unfathomable. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm challenging what we're all about. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who are doing very well, thank you, from the current system who really would prefer I just shut up,
Mhm.
right? But it needs to be challenged. We need to question everything. Do we just accept that this is how it is? And if we do, we will continue along the same pathway that we're on now. And you look at people around the world who are doing it really tough, and we let that happen. And you have to ask why. Well, because it serves others that things stay the way they are. The status quo is deeply entrenched, and the inertia is so strong that to change this requires a huge upswell. It's almost a movement. And we
Mm.
saw what things like Me Too could do to shift the narrative that was, globally. And I think people have said, well, why don't you just go into politics or something if you want to change things? And I think politics is the worst way to get something done. I think what you need to do is set up a movement that becomes a huge lobby group that can then have an influence.
Right. So do we need a new guru? Do we need somebody who is going to stand up and be the advocate for this change? Is this
Well, look,
you? Are you our advocate for this change?
I'm hardly a guru. I don't even have the robes. I think it's not about that. If you look at Me Too, there wasn't really a person you could point to and go, "That's Me Too." I think it's just the movement itself. It's the requirement that if we all feel strongly enough, we should all stand up and do something about it. And the philosophy is about that conversation. It's about having those discussions. And I'm always happy to be challenged. I don't believe I've got it all right, but I'm having a go, and it's like we need to talk about this. And if enough momentum happens, we can make change happen.
Yeah, but I would like to see somebody step up. A Martin Luther King type personality. You could go back. A Muhammad, a Jesus, somebody like that who is going to, be the lightning rod for this change. But you know, have people really just become too self-indulgent to see the big picture and even think about looking for somebody that could help us change?
Look, I'm happy to be that figurehead for now, but this movement is bigger than just me or any one person. It may need a focus point, and I agree. It's easier to have a voice from a person you can relate to than just a whole lot of people. But for me, it's about getting everyone talking about this and making, I guess, making change happen through a a global desire to see change happen. Um, it's not an easy thing to change these huge structural changes, and who's going to put up their hand first and go, well, I'll give up, making money and try and strive. No one's going to do it on their own. So it needs these changes to happen at the same time in multiple points. Because if one country says, well, we're going to change our GDP from profitability to contribution to society, well, how are they going to deal in a global market? Right? It's not going to
Hmm.
work. So we need to see that happen everywhere. Um, and that's why it's called the philosophy, because before change and action can happen, the thinking needs to change first. And that's why these discussions are happening, because I'm trying to get the thinking to change where we can see, well, maybe there is another alternative. Maybe it doesn't have to be this way.
So you would see this more obviously as a grassroots change, whether, it's people reading your book and taking that, or just examining life in general for a larger, a greater understanding of, as we mentioned earlier, the meaning of life. But, having these changes and making these changes to ourselves, how can we have a direct impact on the world beyond those who are just in our social or civic circles?
Well, we are the world, to quote someone famous. um, I mean, the world is us. It's made up of us. So the more of us that start talking and thinking about this, the more we can change and have that positive effect. There's no point, a lone voice just speaking up because nothing gets done. But if enough people want to see that change happen, it starts with talking to your friends and family about these ideas and then coming together and all these little nodes connecting to become a larger organism, I guess. I want to see change happen in the education system, but the education system isn't one system. It's multiple education systems around the world. So we need to see a shift in that desire for a curriculum change globally. We need to see structural changes. I talk in the book about the political system. I talk about the economy, the things that govern our society that we just accept is normal. Even currently, you look at something like the inflation, cost of living crisis that we have. How do we fight inflation? We put up interest rates. What impact does that have? It targets mortgage holders, right? So does that make sense when it's maybe people who have their house paid off and have free cash who are more likely to have free money to spend, which contributes to inflation? Doesn't make any sense to me, but we accept that that's just how it is because that's the way we've always done it. But there are so many more levers at our disposal now that we could use, but we don't because even politicians are afraid to make big changes because they're either unpopular or they won't even see them to fruition because they're not in term long enough.
Mm, yeah. So then at the end of the day, are you then seeing this for these changes to really be effective? We have to take at the beginning personal responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's why I say so it initially begins with these sorts of discussions. Then go and talk to your neighbor. Now, what that does is it means you get to meet people who you live with, but you can also have these same discussions with them. So it has the effect of going viral and spreading it. It is a grassroots movement. It is just about talking to people about this. Now, at some point, it becomes large enough that you then can start talking to government and say, well, look, we've got all these people and, these organizations that also want to see this change. So it's growing it from the bottom up. And that's really the only way we can see things happen. Um, you know, I'd love to say this is a self-help book and you can read the book and you can go, I just do steps 1 to 10 and I've got a better life. But I'm really tackling some major structural changes. It does begin with us all doing something, talking about this. But at the end of the day, it is for big, much larger goals.
Right. So by reading the book, we need to then, you know, take what you are proposing and do this purposefully to be something
Absolutely.
beyond ourselves. By us taking and making these changes ourselves, that is going to push itself out into the world.
That's right. And, there will still be people who come into the philosophy organization, I guess, if you want to call it that, who want to be leaders, who want to lobby to government, who want to take a larger role. I'm not expecting everyone wants to do that. Um, but it is something that's going to take time to build because these are massive goals. And that's why it's very easy to look at this and just go, this sounds like utopia. This is just some big idealistic thing that's not realistic at all. It's not in the current context of how we think, and if you only think in the short term. But my goal is that we need to start now. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but we need to start thinking differently. We need to start adopting the view that we're all connected and we need to start building a world that is for all of us. I talk about we are such a dominant species on the world. We've harnessed agriculture, farming, animal domestication, growing crops. We have it all, and yet all do not have it. And for me, that's the bitter pill that we have so much potential to do so much for so many, and yet we're very self interested. And I blame that partially on a capitalist focus, but also the need for us to survive at whatever cost we can, which means we're not thinking about our fellow man. We're often just thinking about ourselves.
So then to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, we really need to see a shift of this idea away from generational wealth to more of generational health.
I like that. Can I use that?
Sure, sure.
uh,
Just give me, you got to give me a credit though.
yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's hard to put into words when you think about what we could have, what we could be doing. I mean, imagine if you didn't feel you had to go to work 5 or 6 days a week, but you could look after your elderly parents. You could do more for those who didn't have enough. You could do some painting. You could write some songs or poetry because that's what makes you happy. Imagine happier people in the world. It's there is so much here that we can do, and it sounds very kumbaya, and very let's all hold hands. But maybe that's what we're lacking. Maybe we're just not holding hands enough.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah. Now I'm of the age now where I'm getting closer to retirement, so I can imagine a day where I don't have to work 5 days a week. In
Yeah.
fact, I think about it far more often than I probably should. Okay, so I want to just go back and talk about what led you to where you are today. You mentioned that the book itself came out of your own personal observations. So, did you develop this philosophy prior to writing the book, or did this desire to find a philosophy cause you to write the book?
Oh no, I never sought to write a book. I never sought to find a philosophy. The philosophy found me. I've had a very colourful life. I've done lots of different jobs and things, and most recently, I have a software development company. And as part of that role, I go into businesses and I help them analyze their systems and processes and structures and help them optimize what they're doing and run better. And through that, I think I took that same skill set and applied it to society and looked at how we're running and why, asking the questions that I would ask a business. Well, why do you keep doing that? And it's the same sort of thing. I'm asking, why do we keep doing the things that we're doing? So it was that awareness, but I'd had these ideas brewing since about 2018. I think I first documented some of these thoughts. It was never anything more than that. It became an idea for a movement, but it was once I was sitting on a bus ride, I was traveling overseas. I was sitting on a bus for 5 hours, and it just came to me that I need to distill these ideas into a documented format that I can share with others. There's no point just talking to people about these ideas. I needed to get it down. And that's when the idea of a book came to me. And I must say, look, I'm not a book person even. I don't even read books. In fact, when I was at school, I'd pay my sister 50 cents to read the books, tell me what they were about. So I was outsourcing way back then. So the idea of even writing a book was so foreign to me that it never even really entered my mind. But when I came back from that trip, I had already had several years of these ideas in my head brewing. And I just came back and turned on a microphone and just dictated it. It was like a stream of consciousness flow that came out of me that I then tweaked up and it became the book. But I have to say, it is a journey that never started out to be what it became.
Yeah, now there's a couple points I want to talk about of what you just mentioned there, and you actually do talk about this in your biography that you are not an avid reader, and that the approach you took to your book was that you wanted these ideas to be fresh, so you weren't reading other philosophers and sort of correlating their views with
I
your
was
own.
very concerned that I would take on other people's ideas and subconsciously and then just say that these are my ideas. So I didn't read, I didn't get into other philosophy books or other people's teachings. And much to my partner's chagrin, she said, that's very arrogant of you not to read other people's things. Um, but it was more about I just felt that these were inspired thoughts that they came to me through my lived experience. And if they happen to be similar to what other people had written, then that's more about universal truth than me actually copying something. And as it turns out, because I have read a few things since then, that yeah, there are a lot of people who are very much aligned on a lot of these thoughts as well. And that's been very reassuring to me as well.
So you believe, though, that anyone who takes the time to sit and do the reflection will ultimately come to the same uh, realizations that you have.
Well, only if you're self-aware enough. I don't believe everyone can just do self-reflection and find their way. There are a lot of narcissists who will call it self-reflection, but really it just serves their own agendas. So it's not for everyone to reach the same conclusion. But what I'm saying is that there are others who have written books that have reached the same conclusion.
Right. And then you refer to those as universal truths. Now, can we truly have universal truths?
Well, I believe we can, and I talk about this in the book as well. I talk about the concept of true north. True north is different than magnetic north. Magnetic north is something that changes based on the poles and the magnetic field. We call it north, it's where the compass points, but that can change.
Mm.
Whereas true north is a fixed point, it never changes. And I think deep down, sometimes we know something to be true north, but we act on the magnetic north pathway because of profits or self-serving needs or other things. And deep down, we know it. Intuitively, we know we're doing that, but we do it anyway.
Yeah, I like that because really societal norms is the magnetic north. And those can fluctuate and change based on what, is currently in vogue.
That's right. And, it could be the political climate, it could be whatever's going on. And they do change, and we often bend with those. Whereas True North is really, that thing deep in your heart, to be the right thing to do. It's like I mentioned, banks. If you've been a loyal customer of a bank, for instance, you get the usual served up offerings. If you're a new customer, you will be enticed in with 0% interest for a period of time or whatever. Now, the True North says loyalty should be rewarded. However, what we do here is we offer a better deal to someone who's new because of profits.
Yeah, I mean, I would hardly consider banks the epitome of loyalty.
But it's
Uh,
an easy to understand, comparison. And there's
yeah.
many of those sorts of comparisons that we know this is a value. Loyalty is a value that we admire, and yet we go and do the opposite. Whereas I would say maybe we flip it. Maybe banks offer a better deal the longer you've been with them.
Mm. Yeah, you should pitch that because I would certainly I would like that. Now, back to this concept though of the true north, which I quite like, is really this kind of comes down to also this idea that, we know what the right thing to do is, but it is often not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, sure. And easiest could be for a whole lot of reasons. So, if we know something is the right thing to do, but it doesn't bring us money, or it makes us uncomfortable, we might still avoid it and go the other way because, as you say, it's easier. And this current generation, they avoid discomfort. If you look at young people today, they will avoid conflict where possible. Um, and I think it's very much about, well, maybe sometimes you need to have an honest conversation with someone. Um, and I think those sorts of things we do avoid. Um, yeah, I I think true north is something we you don't know what true north is until you're self-aware enough, right? You need to know you need to know your values. Now, true north may be something that varies between people. right? My upbringing might change my true north to your true north, but I think there is an objective true north that is all about goodness. And when we can tap into that, I think then we understand when we're actually straying off that path.
Yeah, because you propose this one change that could solve many of society's issues. So, what is that one change?
Well, that change is learning respect, right? So I don't know, if you have these problems, but where I live, we have youth gangs roaming the streets with machetes, breaking into people's houses. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Um, stealing cars and that sort of thing. So I look at how does a child go from a blank slate as a baby to that? How does that become acceptable behavior? And I talk about we need to overhaul the education system because we have no idea what values they're learning in the home. You talked earlier about, church and learning those kind of morals and associating with each other. There's no consistent learning that happens from home to home, so we don't know what a child is learning in their home environment, but we could control it in the school that every child is exposed to. And so for me, it is that learning process that can change. So a kid that's learnt from the time they were 4 or 5 about how to be a moral, good human being, I would find difficult to come out of school at the end and then just go and attack people. You would have been programmed all along the way. And so it's that reprogramming of society, and it sounds a bit sterile, but it's that reprogramming that we need to do. And there's a chapter in the book called The Human Operating System, and I talk about that, we have nature versus nurture. Nature is our operating system. If you're a Windows or Mac, you know what that means, right? It enables functions to occur, but it doesn't actually say what those functions are. It just tells you how to click on something, how to open something. It's the programs that we run that actually control what happens, what actions we can take. It's that programming that we can have an influence on. And that's why rejigging the education system is so important to installing the programs for our next generations.
Yeah, but that's gonna, that's a huge undertaking because you are going to get so many differing opinions as to what should be taught in schools. So we see this in the US where there's book bans, right? And some people want to either say the Lord's Prayer or do the the Pledge of Allegiance, all that sort of stuff. So to get to some sort of consensus, I mean, that almost seems like an impossibility to me.
Yeah, and it probably is. So, look, the education system now faces that right now. What should be taught in schools, even within a country, what should be taught in different schools, whether they're private schools, Catholic schools, state schools, independent schools, what gets taught is often discussed and quite controversial. So, it's going to be no different. The only thing is, I'm talking about that this should be done globally. Now, those are nice goals and aspirations to have. Maybe we need to start in one state, one country, and roll it out from there and then hold it up as a model and show the results of that. So, however, it needs to happen. But the goal is I'm setting what the goals should be. Now, we need to either say, yes, we want to do that, or no, we don't want to do that. There are a lot of things in my book that are quite controversial, and I know a lot of people will not be interested in tackling any of them. One of the most controversial is a social credit system, right? Because we look at society and how do I know if you're a good person? Like if I go on Airbnb, I can look at your ratings and see how good were you as someone who, rented a property. If I go on Uber, I can see if you've got 5-star rating or 1-star rating and I can get a sense of you. But in society, in day to day, I don't know what sort of a person you are. And I deal with you. Do I want to leave my child with you? How much do I want to integrate with you as a person? The the impediment that we have to us opening up and going and meeting our neighbors is that we're scared, right? We're fearful of opening up to other people and potentially being taken advantage of. So one of the things is we need to have a way that lessens those barriers to connecting with people. And part of that for me is, how do we get to know if someone is a good person? There is no single way to know that. I don't know if I should sell you something and you come to my house. Am I going to be attacked? So I'm advocating for a way that we can have some sort of a scoring system for people. Now we have it in certain things. So right now, if I'm caught speeding, not only will I get a fine, I will lose. I'll get demerit points taken off, which means for my driving history, I will have that reputation that affects how I am as a driver. The same in all those other things like Airbnb and Uber. But we don't have a holistic view of someone as to how they are. That's a very controversial thing that I talk about in the book. I know they do it in China, but they do it for necessarily other reasons. I'm advocating that we do it as a way to open us up to being able to deal more freely with each other, because I think that barrier of fear is a big one.
Yes, definitely the fear of the unknown. Now, you talk about the sort of scales that we can, or the system of rating people. I mean, first of all, we do have certain things. We obviously have criminal record checks, which would tell us, okay, are you a good person? Oh, you committed this crime, and this crime. I'm going to suspect perhaps you're not a good person. There are credit ratings, right, that people use. But then we have our personal bias ratings, right? Now, and this is the difficulty with sort of overcoming what you would like to achieve, is that these personal biases are going to be so hard to get over, because it would be like, oh, okay, I meet somebody new. Well, where were you born? Oh, what kind of, economic environment were you brought up in? Oh, what's your religious beliefs? So we start using those as,
Absolutely. But you're saying this from your point of view today. If you'd gone through that schooling education system that I'm proposing, you won't have those biases as much because you will have learnt how to see everyone equally. And that's what I'm saying. In our current paradigm, it's hard to see a lot of these things I'm talking about. But when you have been brought up your whole life with this openness, inclusion, that everyone is equal, not some more equal than others, then you have a different perspective on those things. And that's what this is about. I can't say we can change us with our embedded thoughts and ideas. I'd like to believe we are still capable of change, but really this is about the next generations and how we can instill that in them.
yeah, and I'm totally on board with what you're proposing here. It's just somehow we need to find, and maybe this is what your book will teach us, is this sort of baseline system of beliefs. And when I say beliefs, I mean what you talk about: respect, openness, accepting. So that should be the basis of the education. Is you can go on to, start maybe having some other beliefs that I may or may not agree with, but at least I can be respectful and accepting of who you are and some of the things you believe.
That's right. It's building a strong foundation. And we can't control what happens after that, and what people learn in their home environment or the people they hang out with after school. We can't control all of that. And this isn't about trying to control everyone. It's really just trying to help humanity level up. I think we're
Mm.
just missing this foundation of, respect and, empathy. Do we have enough empathy for each other? And do we have enough gratitude for the fact that we're even here? I think when you don't have gratitude, you have a sense of entitlement. Like, I deserve to have 3 meals a day. I deserve to be able to have anything I want. And I should be able to fly business class and do anything. Why didn't you upgrade me? When I'm saying the focus should be, isn't it a miracle that you're even floating in the air? It's just a shift in perspective. And
Mm.
then you start to see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, so it's time for a reset. Now, we mentioned earlier a bit about these sort of universal truths. And obviously, one of the universal truths that we all live with is that we will die. Now, you state you don't believe in life after death, but you see value in death as it gives purpose to life. Can you expand on this concept?
Absolutely. If we had an open-ended ticket to living and there were no consequences, there was no life and death consequences to our decisions, I think what that would do is amplify the problems that we have today, that we are so entitled and we can do anything and it doesn't matter. And it's that feeling that it doesn't matter that really is the crux of that, because it's that meaning and purpose that we need as human beings. And whilst I don't believe per se in, I become a grasshopper at the end of this, I do believe that knowing that we're all going to die is incredibly important for us being able to prioritize what's important. Um, Again, it's the equalizer, and it's one of the only things that really is equal about all of us. And yeah, I think we just need more of that kind of sentiment throughout while we're still alive.
Well, and that brings back an earlier concept that we discussed and I brought up this idea of need for adversity. Well, that's probably the biggest adversity you could face to drive you to be successful, to do achievement, is knowing that, yeah, life is finite. And I think we forget that. We forget that, our time here is limited and we don't often make the most of it, which in turn leads to humdrum.
Absolutely. And I think if we focus on the fact that we are all mortal and we our time will end, we don't think about it until it comes and slaps us in the face. You get a serious disease or something and you reassess. And it's like, it's so sad that that's what it takes to reassess. I'm saying we need to be having that gratitude all along. From the moment we are born, we need to start understanding how important it is to be respectful of life. And once we understand how incredible life is. I mean, in the book, I just talk about the universe, the planets, that we've got an ecosystem with, the right amount of rainfall and sunlight to make the conditions conducive enough for life. And then the human body itself, any individual organ is miraculous. But for it all to operate the way it does, that is just so miraculous. And we forget that because we're just so focused on, I go to work, I do this, I'm going to have fun, enjoy my life, go on holidays. And it's like, we're missing this amazing, bigger picture perspective of life.
We're missing that sense of wonder.
And that's my opening chapter is called Something's Missing. And yeah.
And that's what it is. Well, now, with all things being equal, I would like to thank you for sharing your ideas, your philosophy, and your desire to inspire change with myself and my listeners. And I hope you are really successful with your endeavors.
Thanks, Graham. I really appreciate it. It was a great discussion, and there's so much there, and I can see that you were really feeling it, and that for me gives me joy to see that I can share these ideas with others. So thank you so much.
As you can probably tell, I'm personally intrigued by what Alex is promoting through his philosophy. Sure, it may be somewhat ambitious and idealistic, but why not start something within ourselves and look to push it out to make a better world? Please visit Alex's website, thephilosophy.net, to find out more and look to purchase his book on Amazon or listen to the audiobook on most major platforms. Until next time, keep working on your self-upgrade to break out of the humdrum. Take care.